At exactly midnight, London time, on January 18, 2026, something changed, quietly, surgically, and without mercy. While the world stayed busy chasing celebrity gossip and political noise, an invisible hand moved across the official royal website. If you had been watching in that exact second, you would have witnessed history being rewritten in real time. Archie Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Mountbatten Windsor, the children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, weren't simply shifted down the line. They were erased, completely removed from the line of succession. No statement came from Buckingham Palace. No solemn briefing reached the global press. And there was no time for the Montecito PR machine to respond. Just a cold, clinical deletion, as if they had never been there at all. This was no glitch, no routine update. This was the final move in a secret, tightly controlled 7-year operation, known internally as the Quiet Emergency. And at the center of it stood King Charles III, who had finally acted, triggering a legal mechanism decades in the making. But why would a grandfather take such an extraordinary step? Why would he erase his own grandchildren from royal history? To understand that, you have to look beyond the tabloids and into the explosive dossier that landed on the king's desk just 48 hours earlier. Inside were unredacted documents traced directly to an elite fertility clinic in Santa Barbara, records that Harry and Meghan believed were protected by the strongest privacy laws in both the United Kingdom and the United States. For years, the internet had buzzed with rumors, whispers of surrogacy, speculation dismissed as conspiracy. But this wasn't gossip. What those files revealed was something far more dangerous, a constitutional crisis. A paper trail so devastating, so legally explosive, it threatened to shake the very foundation of the British monarchy, a system that has stood for over 1,200 years. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. The monarchy isn't just a family. It's a machine. A constitutional apparatus bound by laws so ancient, so rigid, that wars have been fought over a single phrase. And that phrase comes from the Act of Settlement of 1701. It states that the crown must pass only to the heirs of the body. For centuries, those words have not been symbolic, they've been absolute, non-negotiable. Of the body means a child must be born directly from the monarch's lawful spouse, carrying a provable biological connection to the royal bloodline. That requirement is a thin line between a legitimate sovereign and an unconstitutional pretender. In today's world, royal births may look like charming photo moments outside hospital doors, but behind the scenes, they are treated as matters of national security. And that is where everything begins to unravel. When Meghan Markle announced her first pregnancy in late 2018, the royal system prepared to follow its strict, centuries-old protocol. Traditionally, royal births are overseen by appointed royal physicians, with official documents signed at the moment of delivery, undeniable proof that the child was born from the royal mother. But what followed in May 2019 was anything but traditional. The birth of Archie was wrapped in an unprecedented level of secrecy, almost militant in nature. The Sussexes refused access to the royal medical team. The birth announcement came late, strangely delayed. And most alarming of all, the official notice displayed on the Buckingham Palace easel was missing something critical. The signatures of the attending doctors. This wasn't a modern twist. It was a historic anomaly. A break in protocol so severe that it sent shockwaves through constitutional scholars and parliamentary watchdogs alike. And yet, that was only the beginning. Because the most chilling piece of this puzzle would emerge in 2021. The birth of Lilibet Mountbatten Windsor in California unfolded far beyond the reach of the British Crown, completely outside its jurisdiction, its oversight, its verification. At the time, the world brushed it off. People believed it was just another example of Harry and Meghan fiercely guarding their privacy from an unforgiving press. We were fed a comforting narrative that they were modernizing the monarchy, breaking cycles, setting boundaries. But behind the heavy oak doors of Buckingham Palace, it was seen very differently. This wasn't privacy. It was perceived as a calculated threat, one that struck directly at the constitutional core of the United Kingdom. Because the truth is brutally simple. If a child in the line of succession is born through surrogacy or donor genetics, they are legally disqualified. No exceptions. No gray area. No second chances. And the consequences? Catastrophic. If the Crown knowingly allowed such a child to remain in the line of succession, it wouldn't just bend tradition, it would break the system itself. Every law signed, every military command issued, every royal assent given by that future monarch would be legally void. The fallout wouldn't just shake Britain, it would ripple across the entire Commonwealth, threatening to collapse the monarchy altogether. That's why the leaked Santa Barbara fertility dossier isn't gossip. It's not scandal. It's evidence. A smoking gun the palace had feared for years. According to high-level insiders, those unredacted files contain everything: detailed medical timelines, airtight non-disclosure agreements, and biological transfer records that directly contradict the public story. A paper trail so precise, so damning, it suggests the act of settlement of 1701 wasn't just challenged, it was deliberately bypassed. It is alleged that Harry and Meghan believed they could outmaneuver centuries of British constitutional law using California's strict medical privacy protections. They leaned on Hollywood-style NDAs, assuming the monarchy, ancient, cautious, image-conscious, would never dare cross that legal line. They thought they had found a loophole. For a time, it looked like they had. Archie and Lilibet remained listed in the line of succession. The Sussex brand flourished, fueled by royal titles and proximity to the throne. That connection became currency, powering multimillion-dollar deals, funding their Montecito lifestyle, shaping their global influence. To the public, the story seemed clear. Harry and Meghan were always 10 steps ahead, outmaneuvering a slow, outdated institution. The palace appeared reactive, wounded, almost paralyzed. And King Charles III, painted as hesitant, conflicted, too burdened by emotion to act. But that version of the story was an illusion. Because the truth, buried deep inside the operation known as the Quiet Emergency, reveals something far more calculated. Charles didn't stumble upon this dossier, and wasn't handed evidence at the last minute. This endgame had been quietly orchestrated years earlier, by none other than Queen Elizabeth II herself. To understand the trap, you have to go back to January 2020, to the Sandringham Summit. To the world, it looked like a grieving grandmother trying to hold her family together. But she wasn't just a grandmother in that room. She was a monarch securing the future of the crown. During that summit, Harry and Meghan were presented with what seemed like a routine exit agreement. Standard procedure, formalities, paperwork, but hidden deep within its annexes was something else. A dormant clause, a silent trigger, a biological audit. It legally tied the retention of their titles and their children's place in the line of succession to a future verification of biological lineage. They signed it. They didn't question it. They believed it was nothing more than archaic royal bureaucracy. But in reality, it was a ticking time bomb. And the one holding the detonator was Anne. While Charles appeared publicly as a heartbroken father navigating family conflict and was operating in silence, with full, uncompromised authority over the quiet emergency. This wasn't about rumors. This was strategy. She didn't chase headlines. She followed the money. With teams operating at intelligence-level precision, forensic accountants traced financial flows that quietly bypassed the UK, bypassed London, and led directly to one place: an exclusive fertility clinic in Santa Barbara. Harry and Meghan believed their records were untouchable, shielded by American law, locked behind layers of privacy protection. But they made one critical mistake. A fatal one. They used their royal titles on official medical documents. They invoked sovereign status for privilege, for discretion, for protection. But in doing so, they unknowingly activated an ancient legal loophole. One that didn't require a California judge. One that didn't respect jurisdiction. Through sovereign prerogative, and bypassed U.S. barriers entirely, compelling the clinic's London-based parent company to release everything. And what came back wasn't just evidence. It was devastation. Because the Santa Barbara dossier wasn't just medical documentation. It was a ledger, a detailed, undeniable record of what the palace now views as constitutional deception. According to the unredacted leaks, the records paint a disturbing picture, one far more complex than anyone had imagined. They allegedly reveal massive, multitude-wire transfers directed to a high-end surrogacy agency based in Nevada. The timelines don't align. In fact, the documented dates of embryo transfers directly contradict the carefully curated, widely photographed narrative of Meghan's pregnancies. But the deeper you go, the darker it becomes. The dossier reportedly includes aggressive, highly restrictive non-disclosure agreements, contracts signed by American medical staff that imposed devastating financial penalties for any breach. $1 million consequences, designed to ensure silence. And buried within those agreements was something even more chilling, a deliberate effort to keep royal physicians in London physically locked out of the delivery rooms. This wasn't privacy. It was orchestration. A calculated, multi-million-dollar operation, allegedly designed to conceal the truth and manipulate the line of succession itself. And when King Charles III finally received what insiders are calling the smoking gun, he didn't hesitate. He acted. At the stroke of midnight on January 18th, the quiet deletion of Archie and Lilibet from the royal website triggered something far bigger, an aggressive, pre-planned legal offensive now being referred to as the Royal Reclamation Trademark War. Because this wasn't just about titles. It was about power and money. Every business venture tied to Harry and Meghan, from major streaming deals to lifestyle brands, was built on one core asset, their verified connection to the crown. Their trademarks, their contracts, their entire brand identity, all anchored in royal legitimacy. And with one legal stroke, that foundation was gone. When Charles updated the letter's patent, demanding verified biological lineage, he didn't just remove titles. He dismantled the legal framework supporting the Sussex empire. Within seconds, Crown lawyers moved. Pre-prepared injunctions were filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The monarchy began reclaiming the Sussex name, citing fraudulent commercial usage. The fallout: immediate, brutal, unprecedented. In California, panic spread quickly. Industry insiders reported chaos erupting behind the gates of Montecito. Meghan's top-tier talent agency allegedly convened an emergency, late-night meeting. The reason was simple and devastating. Fraud and moral turpitude clauses had been triggered. In high-level contracts, if your brand is built on a false premise, everything collapses. Payments freeze. Deals dissolve. Reputations shatter. Streaming giants reportedly halted remaining payouts pending legal review. Corporate sponsors began quietly removing the Sussex name from their platforms. Without the royal connection, the illusion faded, leaving behind not global icons, but ordinary influencers facing extraordinary financial pressure. But Harry and Meghan weren't retreating. They were preparing to fight. Behind closed doors, a team of elite Los Angeles attorneys drafted a massive counterstrike, a multi-billion-dollar legal challenge aimed directly at the crown. Their argument: that King Charles III had violated international human rights by weaponizing private American medical data. They sought to reframe centuries-old constitutional law, the Act of Settlement of 1701, as discriminatory, outdated, even unlawful in the modern world. Their goal was bold, almost unthinkable: to drag a reigning British monarch into a U.S. federal courtroom. It was a gamble of enormous scale. They believed public sympathy, media pressure, and the machinery of Hollywood could force the palace to retreat. That a high-profile interview, a carefully staged media moment, could shift the narrative. They believed the king would fear the optics. They were wrong. This was no longer a PR battle. It was a constitutional war. And the palace had stopped playing defense. Within just 48 hours of the lawsuit being filed in California, it was dismissed, swiftly and decisively. The judge didn't entertain arguments, didn't allow debate, because of one unshakable legal doctrine: foreign sovereign immunity. A reigning monarch cannot be summoned into a foreign court, cannot be deposed, cannot be judged under another nation's jurisdiction. Charles isn't a corporate executive. He is the living embodiment of the British state. And U.S. courts have no authority over that. The lawsuit didn't just fail. It collapsed. And in collapsing, it triggered something far worse. By filing the case, Harry and Meghan inadvertently placed the Santa Barbara dossier into the public legal record. They validated its existence, giving it weight, credibility, permanence. They confirmed the very evidence that threatened to destroy them. And across the Atlantic, the final move was already in motion. Inside the historic, wood-paneled chamber of the House of Commons, lawmakers acted with rare unity. The Bill of Sovereign Integrity was fast-tracked, pushed forward with unanimous, bipartisan urgency. Because this was no longer about family. It was about the survival of the state itself. And the true brilliance of this final maneuver wasn't just the law. It was the shield behind it: parliamentary privilege, an ancient, untouchable force, capable of saying what no court could silence, and revealing what no lawsuit could bury. Under British law, any statement made by a member of Parliament during an official session is shielded completely, immune from both civil and criminal liability. No lawsuit can touch it, no contract can override it, and certainly, no American NDA can silence the British Parliament. So when the moment came, it wasn't chaos, it was precision. In a chilling, meticulously orchestrated session, broadcast live to the world, the Prime Minister rose and formally entered the unredacted Santa Barbara dossier into the parliamentary record. In that instant, the multimillion-dollar NDAs signed in California became meaningless. The layers of medical secrecy shattered. And then, the truth was spoken aloud. Every detail. The embryo transfer dates. The offshore payments. The Nevada surrogacy agency. The deliberate exclusion of royal physicians. Piece by piece, the alleged cover-up was laid bare, etched permanently into history. What had once been dismissed as rumor was now recorded as state fact. And with that, everything changed. Because once the evidence entered the public record, a dormant clause within the newly introduced legislation was triggered, a clause tied to treason. The deliberate attempt to place a non-biologically verified child into the line of succession was formally recognized as an act against the state itself. But King Charles III did not send guards. He did not order arrests. He didn't have to. The law moved on its own. A modern revival of the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 came into force automatically. With the constitutional breach now established, Parliament acted swiftly, stripping Harry and Meghan of their titles. No dramatic decree. No emotional address. Just law. Final. Absolute. Unavoidable. They were no longer the Duke and Duchess. They were simply Harry and Meghan, private citizens, cut off from the institution that once gave them global influence, now left to navigate a reality far removed from royal privilege. This was the true scale of the quiet emergency. For years, they believed they were outmaneuvering an ancient system, using media, celebrity, and modern influence as weapons. They mistook silence for weakness. They mistook patience for inaction. But the monarchy endured. It always has. It survived wars, revolutions, plagues, and now, this. And as the dust begins to settle, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The quiet brilliance of Queen Elizabeth II. She saw what others didn't. Long before the crisis reached its peak, she had already begun securing the future. At the 2020 Sandringham Summit, she didn't react. She prepared. She embedded safeguards, built contingencies, set the stage, a legal trap, perfectly designed. She placed the mechanism in motion, handed its execution to Princess Anne, and ensured that Charles would one day have the authority and protection to act decisively. And when that moment came, he did. The removal of Archie and Lilibet wasn't a family dispute spiraling out of control. It was strategy, execution, a sovereign defense mechanism, carried out with absolute precision. The Crown demonstrated something unmistakable. It is not fragile. It is not reactive. It is an institution bound by laws so ancient and unyielding that no amount of fame, wealth, or influence can break them. The Act of Settlement of 1701 still stands. The rules remain unchanged, and the monarchy remains intact. But while the Crown stands firm, the consequences are only beginning to unfold elsewhere. In Montecito, the reality is hitting hard. Without titles, without royal status, without the institutional shield that once protected them, Harry and Meghan now face a different kind of battle, one rooted in contracts, finances, and survival. Multimillion-dollar deals are under review. Clauses once buried in legal fine print are now front and center. Allegations of misrepresentation carry real consequences. What began as a constitutional crisis in London is transforming into a financial reckoning in California. And yet, even now, one question lingers, quiet, unsettling, unanswered. How was this executed so flawlessly? How did in time every move with such precision, without triggering the collapse too soon? Because the truth is, this wasn't improvised. It was planned, step by step, long before the world ever realized what was coming. The late Queen didn't just leave behind instructions. She left a blueprint, a classified, calculated sequence, followed with almost military precision. And what happened behind the closed doors of Sandringham in 2020? Maybe even more revealing than everything that followed.